And welcome back to another fantastic episode of This Uncanny Earth. Joining us today, we have a very special guest. We have two kind of
That's
guests
right. That's
today.
right.
But before we get to them and before we get to our topic tonight, a little bit of business to take care of. We have hired on two people to fill certain roles. One of them will be here tonight. The other one will probably be in the comments. We have Steven. He will be our man on the street, as it were. So, he'll be like that
Special
guy.
uncanny correspondent.
Yeah, he'll be an uncanny correspondent. He'll be out in the field bringing us the latest and greatest from all of the paranormal world. And also, we have Leah Carpenter. She is our lead designer. So, our merchandise designs and everything else will be going right through her. So, be prepared. We will have some really cool stuff coming out. Apple is here. If you could please post your Etsy link into the chat so people can get some stickers, because she's selling stickers right now. Got some really cool designs. You're going to want to get on that because they will be in limited quantities and there'll be variants. So we got some really good stuff cooking for you guys today and here on out. Spider, what do you have coming up for everybody so they know what's going on in your world?
Well, you folks know that I've been very busy still with the Spider Does Things channel, so there's still the Uncanny Spirits Club as often as I can get to it. There's still game streams, which you can also watch Rob's game streams as well. So watch us both on Twitch or when I transport my videos to YouTube. I'm doing Just Cause 4 right now, actually doing
Oh,
a playthrough of
nice.
that. So it's the
Nice.
first time I've got into the game. I was going to do 3, but it did weird things on my screen. So
Should have
I don't
played
know.
2. 2 is the best one.
I don't have to. I have 3 and 4, but I'll go
2
back
was
to
free, wasn't it?
maybe.
Should look into that. Anyways.
If you folks listened in on Wednesday, I was on the Musicians Hangout show on YouTube, and we talked about a lot of things. And one of the things we talked about is all the exciting things coming up in this Uncanny Earth. And do you know who came up in that conversation, Rob?
Me?
Partially. But do you know who else came up in that conversation?
I do not. Who else came up in that conversation?
The one and only legendary Les Odell came up in that
Really?
conversation.
Really?
Yeah. And they were able to find him on Facebook, and he might have himself some new fans out there in the West Virginia paranormal
he needs to get on the
landscape.
show.
So yeah, it was a good time, and that's what's going on in our world for now.
All right. Well, let's bring in first our correspondent from the street. You won't see his face because he doesn't have a camera yet. I'm gonna see if I can get him one.
Incognito.
Incognitus. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Steven. Steven, welcome to This Uncanny Earth, buddy.
Hello. Thank you for having me tonight.
Excellent. Excellent. This is our correspondent. He's going to be dropping here. We're going to give him the floor here in about a couple minutes. And we're going to go from there. Hello, Ashley. Welcome, welcome. Hello, Apple. Apple, if you can hear me, post your Etsy link in the comments so people can check out your stuff. Now, coming from Arizona, we have a gentleman who is very well versed in Wendigos, Native American folklore, skinwalkers, all that good stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Ryan Tremblay. Ryan, how are we doing today?
We are doing great. How are you guys doing tonight?
Excellent, excellent. I want to say first and foremost, thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate it, and we're looking forward to having a great conversation with you tonight.
Oh yeah. And there's
Steven.
Ashley. Hi, Ashley.
Hello, Ashley. Steven, yes. What do you got for us? Hit us with what you got.
All right. So tonight I wanted to talk about the Miami Mall incident. You may have heard of this. It happened at the Bayville Mall in Miami, and they say that some kids, well, here, do you want the cover story first or the conspiracy story?
Give us both, but pick one.
Okay.
Start with the cover, so we got the facts, and then we'll go into
start with the cover story.
Okay, so what they claim, the cops claim that it was a bunch of teenagers, excuse me, the cops claim that it was a bunch of teenagers shooting off fireworks, but it's turns out that this is identical to a cover story from a news story in 2023. So some people are theorizing that it might be a cover story. But anyways, if it was kids shooting fireworks, they sent out the entire police force for the entire city, calling it a state of emergency, basically. Let me find this real quick. Emergency call of the entire city is the exact terminology. which means they sent every police unit in the entire city to deal with the situation. So if it was just a few kids with some fireworks, why did they need that many police, sent to deal with a few kids with some fireworks? Now, here's the conspiracy theory. People think that it might have been aliens because they saw there was a graffiti artist there at the time, and he saw some kids down there with what he said looked like a DVD player, and they were messing around with it, and they were like, plug it in. And so they found like a little electrical outlet by a fake tree over there, and they plugged it in, and when they did, they claimed that it opened up a portal and outstepped this little arm and a leg, and they said it was kind of shadowy but also kind of solid at the same time. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was there was a dude that was on TikTok, and at first he claimed that he was at Foot Locker shopping with his girlfriend when he heard what sounded like gunshots, which, they say was the fireworks. But he said that he heard the gunshots come from, the right, I believe is what he said. I've got the video in the source document over here on YouTube. But he said that he heard the gunshots and he ran out, and there were 3 mannequins in the window for the Foot Locker, and he claims to have seen 3 shadowy figures teleporting and getting closer to him. So most likely they were mannequins. But later on, he deleted his video, and they said that he had never been to Miami. But how would he know the layout of the Foot Locker in Miami, and that particular mall in Miami had a Foot Locker if he had never been there? And then they also had some video at 20 minutes into this first video on YouTube. They have a video of a large shadow jumping out of a car and disappearing just a few seconds later that seems to corroborate what witnesses were saying about shadowy figures in the mall. And you may be wondering why they don't have more evidence, like why people's phones weren't working. And they claim that police were making them delete the videos, as well as there had been a power outage the previous night, so a lot of people's phones were still dead. And that's what I've got for you. So I'll leave the rest up to you to figure out what you think happened.
Interesting. We'll throw that out to the Uncanny universe out there.
Yeah,
and
what do
for
you guys
you
think?
folks, drop your comments about that on this video either now and chat among yourselves, or after we've finished up, and you can put it up once it's up on YouTube.
Real quick, for all of the Twitch people that are watching via my Twitch, I turned off the ads because I forgot the ads pre-roll. So I turned the ads off, so there will be no ads for this segment. I just happened to look over. So let's get in with our guest here. Ryan, tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into Wendigos and Native American folklore.
Well, the long story of that is I've always been a monster geek. I mean, I showed you my Godzilla stuff. So,
Yeah, it was slick.
you know,
I like that. I like
growing
that.
up, loving monsters, you just
Big
kind of
G.
gravitate towards, Bigfoot and aliens and Jersey Devil. And I started studying all those things when I was a young kid. But when I started doing other shows, that's when I noticed that Wendigos and Skinwalkers, especially those two, were not getting the proper coverage. Like, you weren't getting the real Algonquin or Navajo traditional stories. You were getting made up stuff. So I kind of figured, if somebody's going to do it, they should do it right. And being in Arizona where the Navajo are, I centralize my research around what they said. So I take their stories and I bring them to the people. So they're getting the actual real lore behind them.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Now, how long have you been studying Wendigos and Native American folklore as a whole?
About 7 years now, 6 years. And then just, more recently, it's the Skinwalker stuff. So maybe about 3 years for Skinwalkers. But when you're studying something like Skinwalkers, 3 years is a lot of time because you learn.
And I know a lot of people will interchange the two because some people will be like, oh, they're the same thing. And you're like, no, there is a significant difference between this one and this one. But they think that. Yeah,
that proves my point because everybody's saying, oh, they're the same thing, or
right.
Wendigo and Skinwalkers are the same thing as the Rake, which the Rake is a creepypasta.
It's 100% creepypasta.
Yeah,
right.
so when they're saying they're all the same thing, I'm sitting there going, but they're not though. Why is nobody actually exposing this and saying, hey, this is the real stories behind them?
Right.
I don't think people realize that Skinwalkers are really a religious belief. They're a spiritual belief for the Navajo. They're not a joke, so we shouldn't be joking about them. We should be taking them seriously. and really handing down their stories, not our stories, not our version of the stories, but their stories.
Deadpool says, I was under the impression that skinwalkers were a type of shapeshifter.
Yeah, they are. They definitely are. They have to use those pelts from the animals they wish to become. But yeah, they would definitely quantify as shapeshifters. I would say that. Yeah.
So tell us about Wendigos. Tell us what they are, where they originate, and some, just something that you think people don't know enough of regarding that conversation.
Okay, so the Wendigo, it's I'd say a demonic entity or a spiritual entity that the Algonquin, the Cree, and the Ojibwe up in Canada all strongly believe in, and it's usually a winter spirit. So it's kind of like an elemental in a way. But in order for somebody to become a Wendigo, there has to be certain taboos that are broken. The most popular one is cannibalism, of course. Everybody knows cannibal, Wendigo. But there's also other ways for somebody to become a Wendigo, either a curse or having nightmares of the Wendigo. Because in the Algonquin and Cree belief, nightmares are a gateway. Okay, so when you're having nightmares, you're opening a door for something to come into you, into your being. So, there's a lot that the people believed in the Wendigo that people aren't really touching on.
I think too, you bring up good points, because I did a little bit of reading before the show. I wanted to get a little caught up myself. And I was reading an account of a gentleman that was with a tribe, 1800s. And one of the people there were having those dreams. They're having dreams of what they would call the winter spirits, so to speak, the up north spirits. And he was slowly looking at the people in his tribe, his daughter specifically, like he wanted to eat her. He was on record as saying, you look good enough to eat. It didn't turn a certain way that it could have went, but I found that interesting because we had talked before the show was rolling about intent. And a lot of times I think people don't know about the curse, first of all, because a lot of people think curse involves skinwalker, but no, it also involves the Wendigo. People immediately go to cannibalism, because obviously that is like out of all the lore and legends, the one people gravitate to the most would be the most morbid aspect, because we're human beings. We're like, you turn into this insatiable monster by eating people. Yeah, but you can also do it by dreaming about them, or by having, I don't want to hear about all that. Whatever. Eating people, right? Is that the key? And I think it's interesting that you bring up that point of dreaming about it, because that right there, like you said, it's opening a gateway. Now, I will ask you this. How do you think that happens? How do you think somebody dreams about that? Because obviously people don't want to become and this is from what I've gathered on researching the Wendigo, and I haven't researched it as long as you have, but I don't know too many traditions where people want to be Wendigos as the skinwalker aspect. Somebody's actively wanting to become that.
Right. So with the Wendigo, it's not really a choice of wanting to become it. They have these dream spirits called Pelaganox. Okay. And the dream spirits, they influence you during your sleep cycle. So you can have positive Pelaganox that, kind of guide you towards the positive things in life, but they can also have the negative kind. And those negative ones, like, owls, porcupines, black dogs, those are usually indicators of the Wendigo. So if somebody's having these, they get so scared, and that fear is what brings the Wendigo Pelaganox into their nightmares. And once it starts manifesting in the nightmares, they can't really shake it too often. It's something they have to go to their elders and say, hey, I'm having nightmares of the Wendigo. And they have to undergo ceremonies, usually like shaking tent ceremonies, or they try to feed them, of all things, beef tallow. They believe that beef tallow makes the Wendigo go away. But sometimes these nightmares get so prevalent, so strong, that they can't get rid of them. And they do believe that once you're dreaming of the Wendigo on a nightly basis, it's slowly working its way into your body.
Now, from other things that I've read, it's something of the heart, where the heart will basically kind of freeze over.
Yes, turns to ice.
And you have to basically pierce that ice to get to the heart to destroy the Wendigo itself.
Yes, and that's why they use the heated beef tallow, because they believe that it melts the ice around the heart, and then the heart can be pierced and the Wendigo is gone. But in not all cases does that work, though. The most famous case actually is that of Swift Runner. I'm sure everybody here has heard of Swift Runner at some point.
By all means, please tell us.
Okay, so Swift Runner was a Cree fur trader in 1878. And, he went along these paths many times, went along the routes. And one winter, he went with his wife, his mother-in-law, and his 3 children. And he was gone for about 3 weeks, but then he came back to the fort that was, where he would make home base. And he talked about how he was starving, how he and his family were starving, and he had to cannibalize his family. And at first they thought, maybe he was making up a story or whatever, but he kept saying that he ate his family, and he was bragging about it. He was like really proud that he had done this. But then he told the people, the Wendigo made me do it. I am the Wendigo. And so the magistrates took Swift Runner and they brought him back to the cabin where he was staying with his family. And sure enough, they discovered a very, very terrible sight. There was, the skulls of his family members cracked open, which showed that he actually actively cracked the skulls open to get to the brains. He had taken the femurs, cracked those open, and sucked the marrow out. There was, greasy handprints of human fat all along the walls to show that he was having kind of like a festival as he was eating them. And he actually bragged about how he killed his infant son. He talked about how he tied him from a pole and he had a noose around his neck and he was pulling on his legs to make him suffocate quicker. And so they were convinced that he was a Wendigo. So they imprisoned him. And even during his prison sentence, while he was awaiting execution, there was a certain guard that would come in. He was kind of a stout fellow. He was kind of chunky. And every time Swift Runner saw him, he would look at him and give this grin and he'd be like, you have this much fat on your bones. So he was measuring the fat with his fingers. So he was indicating he wanted to eat this guy too. And historically, Swift Runner is important because he was the first execution in that province of Canada at the time. So it's historical in a lot of ways.
Now, something that kind of I think about dealing with this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it isn't anybody outside of the realm of whatever tribe that is. Right. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's not like, you didn't have, European fur trappers having these dreams and turning into these beings or these monsters? Why do you think that is?
My personal hypothesis on that is that the Wendigo is a very particular type of entity, that it's bound to certain people and it's bound to a certain area. So obviously it has to be Algonquin, Cree, Ojibwe within that area of Canada. I think if it goes outside of that area, it doesn't have the same power and it can't possess anybody like it could if it was in that territory with those certain people. Almost like it's a bloodline sort of thing. That bloodline is what it's after.
Right.
And sometimes too, isn't it? There's always been talk about the Wendigo specifically, how it's almost tied to the land in a certain way.
Yeah.
Like not necessarily a natural thing, but just tied to something in the landscape.
Right. And that could be something similar to the Skinwalkers in a way. And when we get into Skinwalkers, I'll cover the 4 sacred mountains a bit more. Mm-hmm. But if it goes outside of that area, I don't think it has the power to actually do what it needs to do. So I think there might be a mountain range or maybe just the energies from that area that give it the power that it needs.
You have it's interesting because I read about different beings in different folklores, and you'll have some in there's one in Africa that goes into the Middle East and it basically hops, but it's also very similar in regards to being very cannibalistic. Right. And if it catches you and bites you, you basically it's very, very zombie vampire-esque type parasite starts leaching into your blood and changing you into whatever it is they are. And once again,
like it's very common in all cultures. It's really interesting when you look at it. I've looked at Asian culture and all this other stuff. Even the Asians, the Japanese have a type of vampire. The Native Americans have a type of vampire. Hispanics have vampires. Irish have vampires. It goes on down the line. I don't know if that's cultural interweaving or maybe cultural contamination in that way. You never know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think too that, and I've told people this, having researched, from the ancient past up to now, you find that there is a time period, and it's roughly what I would call the Industrial Revolution era of the world. Before that, you had more belief in folklore. You had more belief in fae and fairy folk and goblins and things of that nature because they weren't pushed out. Once you have the industrial era of these big smokestacks and everything is polluting everything else, you find everything and people start becoming, I don't want to say civilized, but building more advanced civilizations, you start
Mhm.
seeing these sort of beliefs being pushed to the outer edges of civilization. For the most part today, people, if you talk to the average American about a Wendigo, they don't care. They got to get back to work, or they got to watch sports, or they got to watch the news. They don't care. And
Yeah.
I think being that the power that these beings had, I think, is tied to the old world. But once you have different sonic resonance with the towers being built, all the cell towers being built, and you have issues with birds flying and it's messing up their flight patterns, I don't think it's too far off to say that these things have pushed the fringes of what once were, active folklore that existed, that people believed in. They left little things for the different fae folk that were inhabiting their area, their woods, mushroom circles, fairy circles, everything else was a big thing. But then
Yeah.
once man became modernized, and I say modernized because I feel like we've taken a step back intellectually more
we
so
definitely
than
have.
we've advanced. And I've
Mhm.
noticed that you have these legends and lores, but they exist on the outside, as to where, growing up, my mother lived in West Virginia, so she was part of the Appalachian culture. So
Okay.
she still remembers when granny witches and things like that, and they would have poultices, and these things worked.
Yeah.
You couldn't go to CVS, you couldn't go to, the
Right.
drugstore to get your stuff. You had to get, plants and herbs and things like
Yep.
that. And we have lost sight of that. And I think that we have pushed out those legends and those lores to points where the people that lived it, like the Algonquin and the Native Americans that have seen these beings or these monsters,
Mhm.
um, I think it's such a few and far between now because of the point we are in history, where that kind of stuff is just kind of, I want to say, gone by the wayside. It's very much believed in, but
Mhm.
humanity as a whole doesn't really buy into the folklore that it used to.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Ghost is right, and that goes for folks not just outside the city limits, but inside. I think inside the cities more, because now you have a more concentrated group of people,
Right.
and that pushes all those out. And I don't know if you ever read American Gods or not by
Oh
Neil
yeah.
Gaiman. It's a very interesting point that they make, that once people stop believing in these things, they sort of just vanish. They don't
Now,
seem
see,
to
that's what
exist
really
anymore.
caught my interest, though, with the Wendigo and the Skinwalkers, though. It's like, if you talk to the average American, like you said, they go, "A Wenda what?" Whatever. They
Right,
shrug it off.
right,
But if you even mention the name Wendigo to somebody up in Canada, they're kind of like, "Yo, yo, yo, we don't do that kind of talk around here." They don't
right,
want you mentioning the name. Or like, with the
right.
Navajo, don't you dare go up to them and say "Yi Naralushi," because they're going to look at you like you want to die today, don't you? You know,
Right, right.
they still very much believe in these things, and that's what caught my interest. Because here they are, they're getting modernized too. They're using cell phones and everything
Oh
like
yeah,
we are, and yet they still hold on to these beliefs so much. So to me, that says there's something to this. Okay, this isn't just
yeah.
a bedtime story. It's not just a campfire tale they tell to scare the kids. There's something serious about this.
Yes.
So that really caught my interest. Now it caught me into the way where I'm like, I have to tell these stories the proper way. I have to get them across to the people so they know the truth.
And I think there is a safety to learning about this
Mm.
stuff. Like I said, I have the Lesser Key of Solomon and I have the Shems al Maharif, which are used to summon things that most people probably should not be doing that in the first place. But I like to
Mhm.
have the knowledge at hand, because I
Yeah.
always think it's a good thing to have. I always think it's good to have knowledge about the skinwalkers, about Wendigos, about the things that other people see, they feel, they believe in it, they know it exists.
Right.
Because I think the more we learn about that, the more we learn about who those people are, where they
Yeah.
come from, what their beliefs
Absolutely.
are. Being that I do quite a bit of presentations on giants, I've learned about Native American stories where they talk about the black haired giants and the red haired
Mhm.
giants, and they were fighting for territory, and then they would fight the Native Americans, and then they would kill each other, and then all of a sudden the giants are no more, and they're finding these giant bodies, and then you
Mhm.
got the Smithsonian coming in and just kind of saying, okay, little by little, and
Right.
sort of erasing that kind of past. And I think what
Right.
you do, bringing that to the forefront of conversation keeps that alive. And I don't think it's a negative thing. I don't think that, we talked about it before, but I don't think that mentioning a skinwalker is a negative thing. I think it's called preparedness. You want to be ready. You want to understand what's going on around you in a spiritual aspect.
Absolutely. That's very important. That's extremely important.
If we're, if you go somewhere, you're going to be physically aware. You go to a place you've never been. I don't care if it's somewhere that's safe. You're like, okay, cool. I'm going to keep an eye on my surroundings. Why wouldn't you keep an eye on your spiritual surroundings?
Right. Exactly. Know what's out there. Know the dangers that are out there.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about the skinwalker. Give us a kind of a walkthrough of what they are and the differences between them and the Wendigos.
Okay, so the skinwalkers, which in Navajo, it's Yinaralushi. And what that translates to in English is by any means on all fours he goes. What they start out as are shaman, medicine people. At one time, they were actually positive. They were good. They were these people that were helping their people get better. They were helping with the land. They were helping with the crops. But something happened along the way. I don't know if it was like greed that got to them or some kind of just, sinister urge that they had inside of them where they became these volatile people that learned dark arts. And what they do is in order to become a Yinaralushi, they first have to kill or cannibalize a family member. And it has to be somebody close. So a neighbor wouldn't count. It would have to be your mom, your son, your daughter, your grandma. It has to be someone that you're very, very fond of and somebody that you love greatly. So you have to kill them. And by killing them, you're actually allowing yourself to open up to the black magics. And what Yinaralushi will do is when they want to become a certain animal, they have to take the pelt. So coyotes, mountain lions, bears, and wolves are the most common ones because they're predatory animals. And in the Navajo belief, predatory animals are very sacred. They're held very high up on the totems. So for the skinwalkers to kill these things and wear the pelts, they're pretty much giving the middle finger to their religious way of life. And what they do is they take these pelts and they go to some secret cave and they spend days and weeks and sometimes even months chanting over it, doing magic over it until they can wear it and transform into said animal. And what they do is they wreak chaos and strife and trouble onto their own tribes. So, and the difference between a Yinaralushi and a skinwalker or a Wendigo is a Wendigo, like I said earlier, was a demonic spirit or an entity that would possess somebody. A Yinaralushi is somebody who starts out like you and I. They're mortal. They're humans. And they learn the dark arts and they become basically bad warlocks or bad witches.
Now, just a quick aside, because I'm sure it's going to come up at some point. I want to kind of get it out of the way first. We know that some of the television shows about things like Ancient Aliens and everything have been kind of like sensationalized and stuff like that. So knowing what you've researched about skinwalkers and similar beings, what's your take? And I probably know what direction you're going to go with it, but what's your take? And I'm going to ask about Skinwalker Ranch and the whole everything that's been made about it. Is there anything in your mind that makes that sound at all plausible, or is it just basically there for the money now?
I think it's just basically for the money at this point. Because they've strayed so far off from what the skinwalkers really are, and they really ignore what the Navajo had said about them. Like, when I mentioned the 4 sacred mountains, okay, what the 4 sacred mountains are, it's mountain ranges in Arizona, Utah, Texas, New Mexico. And during the Navajo's earlier times, these were the mountains they would travel to for their ceremonies, for their chanting, their sacred times. And so these mountains were very, very important to them. They believed that these 4 mountain ranges were given to them by their gods. Okay, so they believed that it was radiating with deity power and it just had otherworldly power. So if there's a place that people are seeing skinwalkers where there's not a sacred mountain, it can't be a Yinaralushi. It might be something similar, but it's not a Yinaralushi because they have to stick to that ground. It's kind of like the Wendigo in a sense, because if they detach themselves from that magic, from that land, they have no power. They can't shapeshift anymore. They can't do curses. They can't mess with you mentally or spiritually anymore. They just become basically humans. So, anything that's too far off, and Skinwalker Ranch isn't near that mountain range, by the way. So it kind of makes you wonder, did you guys just take little elements from the stories of skinwalkers and create this big money-making scheme with it, or what? I think some things might have been true at one point with Skinwalker Ranch, but I do think it's a money run now. It's a cash grab.
I think personally that it wasn't I don't think it was skinwalkers at all. I think you have, because I read the accounts. We did an episode on it because I'm like, I want to know what this is about. But I went before they even owned it. Before, because like multiple people have owned that area.
Yeah.
You know, before they built up the fence, some millionaire dude owned it and built up all this security. But I went before that, and I went back on it. And what it sounded like wasn't so much skinwalkers, but from what I have gathered in reading books by like Linda Godfrey, it sounds more like Dogman or like a dog entity than it does a skinwalker, because the accounts they were giving, because when I've read accounts of skinwalkers, they're still intelligent. They're in that form wreaking havoc, but they have the mental wherewithal from some of the accounts that I've read to know that they are wrecking and causing havoc, as to where dogmen and dogmen accounts, it's just a vicious thing. They just they go out, they kill livestock, they basically carve through any living thing and then scare off people. They scare them off. And with a skinwalker, it's very intentional. It's very like, I know what I'm doing to you because you're one of us.
That brings up another misinterpretation of the skinwalker, okay? When the Navajo describe the Yinatalushi, they don't mean that they're like a bipedal canine running about, because there's people that say, dogmen or werewolves, or they're all skinwalkers, or even Bigfoot's a skinwalker. That's not what the Navajo said. When the Navajo tell you about the Yinatalushi, they say if you want to know if an animal is a skinwalker, you look at its eyes, because even in animal form, interestingly, it will have human eyes, but when it's in its human form, the eyes of the human are more animal-like, and they have like a silvery glow to them. So they never said they were, bipedal canines running around like Dogman or anything like that.
Right.
That was, again, something that people were dropping into Dogman stories to make it that much more frightening for them to tell the stories. And it's not true, though.
Yeah, I read an account that they do have more human-like eyes when they're in their animal state. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I forgot about that. And that's a very interesting point. And I think what people like to do, they like to sensationalize everything. Yes. So they want it to be that so bad. They'll be like, you know what? Let's sprinkle in a little bit of Dogman. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? Most people that are into that kind of stuff aren't going to take time to read the Navajo legends, the folklore, the things that were going on around the time. And I like that you bring up the fact that they start off good. They start off with good intentions, but then they become sort of corrupt by their own power in a way. Yeah. And then they realize, well, now I can do this. I just have to kind of give myself to whatever entity they believe. And I also think it was a good point you brought up, that they, in order to sort of cross that line, they have to kill somebody very close to them. Yeah. And that's an interesting point, because in many other tales that circle our globe, there are many, many, many times of people that want to become this entity, I'll say. And to do that, they have to kill the person that is closest to them, because it's like
the most.
It's like showing that sign of betrayal. Like I will betray whatever it takes to become what I am, and we see that even in stories like in Dante's Inferno. The lower part of Dante's Inferno wasn't fire, it was ice, because it's a very cold way to turn on somebody. And in Lucifer's mouth, it was Brutus, Cassius, and Judas Iscariot. Like he was eating and pulling apart each one. So I think betrayal, to me, is a very interesting component in the skinwalker folklore, because it takes that step to become that. And I'm not a big fan of things like Skinwalker Ranch, because I think it sensationalizes it. But what it also does is it causes idiots to go out and look for these things.
Yes, and that's very dangerous to do.
Even if you don't believe it, you don't want to go looking for trouble. Leave things as they are, because like I said, you're gonna find exactly what you're looking for, and you're gonna wish you never found it.
Or it's gonna find you. In that case, you may not be prepared. And you're not going to be sure what to do about it. And I've talked to a lot of people and they're like, oh yeah, we're going out on a skinwalker hunt. I was like, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to shoot him or what are you going to do? Because it's going to know what you're there for. Okay. It's going to see you before you see it. And it's been on its property, on its turf a lot longer than you have. It knows where to hide. It knows what to do. It knows how to mess with you. You're walking into a trap, essentially.
Yeah.
So do you want to walk on that land and disrespect something that you don't know how to handle? No, you don't. You absolutely don't. And I don't understand why people do that.
It's kind of like when people go into these like different ghost events and they want to take in the spirit, but then they take the spirit home with them. Like,
right.
You don't know what you're playing with. And I like to tell people, your spiritual protection is important. You want to protect yourself at all times. I mean, you protect yourself. You buy a firearm to protect your home, right?
Absolutely.
Why wouldn't you want to protect your spiritual self? You don't want to leave your spiritual self open to just whatever. And the fact that people would go even skinwalker hunting is just like, are you stupid? Like, is there nothing up there in your brain? If you are at that point where you think that's a solid idea, you don't know, you're not intelligent. I mean, even if the things don't exist, why do you want to find out? Why do you want to know if they exist so bad? Like, why?
And you want to find out the hard way too? I mean, that seems like a very big risk, I mean, what if you go out there, you don't believe, and you're doing all these things you shouldn't do, and lo and behold, the skinwalker shows up. What's your plan? I mean, what's the exit plan for this? What are you going to do?
Run? Because from some of the accounts that I've read, they're fast. They're turning into these animals that are already fast enough, and they have the strength and the power of this animal. Like you said, one of the higher up in the totem predators, but have a human brain. So what are you gonna do with that? And I think a lot of times when you have that, you have these missing person cases that come up. I think a good majority of them are playing with something that you don't know what you're playing with in the first place.
It's something that people are too loose with. They got to be a lot more careful, use more caution. You just don't tamper with things if you don't fully understand it. A minimal understanding is never enough.
I agree.
And even if you understand it, maybe you shouldn't tamper with it. If it's considered dark or dangerous, should you play with it? Probably not.
Now, have you had any firsthand accounts with anything like this?
Nothing like a skinwalker yet. I'm not so sure that I want to have one.
I wouldn't want to either.
Yeah, I mean, I've been speaking to a lot of different people from the Navajo tribe here in Arizona. From the stuff they tell me, I'm going, I want to see one at one point, but now I'm not so sure I want to see one ever. I think I'll just, be satisfied with your stories and what you're telling me and have nightmares from that. I don't need the real living nightmare going through this.
How does one go about having a conversation with the Navajo regarding that? Because I know it's a very tight-lipped thing, and I understand that. I 100% respect that. You can't just be like, hey, let's talk about this. Who are you and why are you telling us? So if I, for say, wanted to have that conversation, because I'm always intrigued by folklore from all over the globe. I enjoy just talking with people about their beliefs and why they believe it and the experience. What do you think is the best way to sort of like put yourself out there, but not to look like, respectfully? How do you go about that?
Well, first and foremost, if you're going to, try to get in on the skinwalker thing, what you have to do is show that you're definitely respecting their tradition. Don't add anything that you hear on a YouTube video. Don't add your own details, just, recite basically what they have said and don't make jokes about it. Don't make any jokes about it. Don't make light about it. And if they tell you, hey, you're wrong about this, be open to learn about it and correct yourself. That's the way that I did it. And I made numerous friends. William Nighthawk, he's a very, very close friend of mine. He's Lakota. And he saw what I was doing with Wendigo and all that stuff. And he came to me and he knew I wanted to learn. So he started talking to me about it, which is it's a big honor for me because you have another Native American saying, hey, you're trying to respect our traditions. So let me talk to you about it. So show respect. That's the most important thing you can do is show the greatest respect. Don't diss it. Don't insult it. Don't joke about it. Like I said, don't add your own details. Don't ever, ever do that.
I had to laugh because you said the YouTube video because there's so many people that'll make these YouTube videos and they're like, you don't even look like you live in the United States.
Yeah, actually, I got into an argument with one guy over on Instagram because he did this skinwalker hunt where he was out in, I think it was like Iowa or something like that. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to find me a skinwalker, and goes out at night and he shows how he's out at night. And he's sitting there going, skinwalker, skinwalker, skinwalker. And he has all this long string of profanity. And I'm going, what are you doing? No, you're not skinwalk hunting at all. You're being an idiot. Okay, you're disrespecting everything that the Navajo have said about it. Stop doing that. So we got to a big argument about it. I'm just like, no, whatever, man.
I do want to give a big shout out to William Nighthawk. I've actually conversated with him about quite a few things, and very informative person to speak with regarding Native American folklore and legends and such. And it's very interesting because we have had, like, I had talked to him about, the skinwalkers and stuff. And it was a very serious conversation. Like there was and I'm not one to ever disrespect somebody else's culture or be disrespectful. Like I'd rather soak in the knowledge. I want to know, because I have my own personal questions about things that go on in the world in the spiritual sense and the metaphysical sense. So I'm always searching for answers to the questions that I do have. And it's a very respectful thing. Like I don't think you should ever make light of somebody else's beliefs, even if you don't personally believe in them yourself. No, I still think you got to have respect. If you want people to respect you, you got to have respect for them. If you're going to want to have those conversations, if you want to sit down with other people and other cultures, you want to have that. You want to have, and that's the thing. I think you make a good point. Don't make light of it, because it's not yours to make light of.
Right. And it's not ours to tack on these little details that didn't exist previously. The details that are there, they're there historically, and they're there for a reason, because these are the things they've observed and that they know about these things. It's not for us to muscle in and be like, yeah, but there's also this and there's also that, when there really isn't, because we're watering down and tainting their religious and spiritual beliefs, and we have no right to do that.
And I think too, you kind of corrupt that legend. You're basically essentially like murking it up.
Yeah.
So if anything, you're giving that entity more power, because now you've muddled it to a point where people don't know how to defend themselves from this thing.
Correct.
And from what I've noticed and some of the accounts that I've seen, I haven't seen too many accounts of skinwalkers or Wendigo going after people that aren't of their tribe or of their lineage, so to speak.
Right.
Like people aren't just like, hey, I'm getting attacked by whatever. No, this is things like Spider said, this is bloodline stuff. This is tied to the land. This is the people that are tied to the land. Absolutely. And have you ever heard of an account of somebody not of that tribe, not of that land, going into that area and meeting with something of that nature?
I really haven't. I mean, all the stories that I've been told from the people here in Arizona, it's always people of the tribe. Like, there's not really outsiders that are really messed with. And I do think, though, that like if an outsider knows too much, like say someone like me, say someone that's actually made it a point to learn about this stuff, I think if I was out there on that territory for a certain amount of time, I could be messed with because I know a lot, So I think the skinwalker might be like, hey, you know too much. You shouldn't know this much.
Right. Agreed.
I don't like this. I don't like this at all. So that's why I'm very, very careful. I'm extremely careful when I do this stuff.
Do you think that they know via maybe just being able to read you as a person?
I think so.
Because you might have a look to you that's like, okay, I know what I'm seeing right now, and maybe I probably should not be seeing this.
Yeah, so I don't think they like that. I think they kind of be like, how do you know so much, and why do you know so much? I don't like this. I don't feel comfortable. So
I think too, the reason that you don't hear about a lot of these attacks, because they don't want to be known. They don't want to be known any more than whatever lurks out in the unknown recesses of mankind wants to be known. Because once that happens, then, like we said before, you're going to get an influx of tourism. And part of me has to wonder if in their more dark arts aspect, they're still in their own way, as dark as it may sound, trying to protect that land that they're tied to. I have to wonder that a bit.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. I think, they're trying to say that, what's mine is mine. And they don't want outsiders there, because they feel that's trespassing. And, I think, if there was tourists, then, yeah, they might be like, hey, this is our land. You have no right to it. So I'm going to protect it in my very violent and very dark way. It's forbidden. People won't like it, but I like it. So I'm going to do it this way. So I think you're onto something there.
And
I really do.
I have to wonder that if somebody comes into your territory, if somebody would come into your house right now, you don't know them, you're going to do what you can to make sure that person is exited from your domicile.
Absolutely.
Instantaneously. And why wouldn't they do the same?
Right. I mean, they have a right to. So
yeah. Whatever they have done, they'll that will come to pass at a later time.
Mhm.
But that's still their territory. That's not your territory. You don't own any part of that. Why are you there? Like, what are you looking for? What kind of trouble are you looking for?
You also got to look at history, though, and I don't mean to sound like racist in any way here, but when white man came into the Navajo land, not much good happened. I mean, that's going to stay there for the rest of our days. Whatever happened back in those days, it's always going to haunt the Navajo Nation. And I think skinwalkers are still tied to that, going, those people that came, those settlers, they weren't good. Their ancestors aren't good. There's nothing good about them. So,
and I think too, when you see what society has become as a whole now, and the wars that we've wrought as human beings, I wouldn't ascribe it just to one specific racial set, but seeing that and having a connection, because Americans, we're different. We're different than the rest of the world because we don't have that ancient history. We don't have an area that like, this was built in, 2000 BC. This is still here. This is crazy. We have stuff that, like, I think the Native American land in, I want to say Illinois, Kathoka. I always get that name. I always try to pronounce it. I think that might be one of the oldest parts in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And that still isn't as old as like what goes on in the Middle East, what goes on in Europe, in Africa. Right. So, and their legends and lore is way, way different. Like they still see Americans, we're not very superstitious. If we are, it's because we're tied to our own ancestors. But for the most part, we're not. But I have been, I've been to places that, I knew some folks from Zimbabwe, and they had a certain way about them, and you couldn't do certain things because they thought it was like you could never write death on anything, like the word death in any form or fashion on anything. Wow. Like if you wrote it, because I was learning Japanese at the time, and I showed this girl, I'm like, it was the kanji for death, shin, and she was like, no, and she like frivolously erased it because she was like, that is bad. That's bad. It's very bad. Even a lot of the Japanese, they won't say she because she is close to death. That's
right. Just like they won't whistle in the dark. Yeah, the Japanese don't ever whistle in the dark. So,
and that's a crazy myth too, because that's big in Appalachia. Like if you hear somebody call your name, you don't answer.
Yeah.
You don't say nothing. Just keep walking. When you get to your car, you can freak out because I was studying that for a while about whistling at night, and I'm like, why can't I whistle at night? I can whistle at night if I want to. Who are you? But reading about it, in the Appalachian mountain region, whistling at night because it alerts things that you don't know what's out there, and it lets them know that you're there. Or if you hear somebody call your name, it lets that thing, that being, that entity know that it's there.
Yep.
And it's basically more or less playing a trick on you. Yep. And I didn't realize that it's one of my favorite things. I love studying the old world. I love studying pre-industrial world. It seems like time, isn't it? It seems like magic still existed.
It did. It really did. I mean,
and then it was pushed out. Go
We
ahead.
didn't have cell phones. We didn't have streaming
Nope.
services back then. Our imaginations were much more focused on that magic, and our focus gave it the life. It gave it that power that it needed, where magic was real, man. We forgot how to do it. That's the problem.
Yeah, I
We're
agree.
so encompassed by cell phones and social media and everything that we forgot how to do that kind of stuff.
But I will say that I like the fact that I can go online and research something and be like, wow, I didn't know this before. Like I can really deep dive into something that I had no idea even was a thing,
Right?
and I got books at the touch of my hands. I have so much knowledge readily available. It's very much a double-edged sword because like you said, on one hand, it's all about how good do I look on social media, my opinions on social media, this, that, and the third, and they censor it like crazy regardless.
Yep.
But to me, it's like I grew up in the 90s. Like we didn't have the internet and cell phones, and there was that magic to it. There was that mystique to things. I would hear in hushed tones about ghosts and spirits and things that my mom and dad saw and like things that my grandparents saw. You couldn't tell nobody. It was something that you could not tell a single soul outside of your family radius. Because back then people thought you were nuts. Nowadays, everybody tells everything, which I don't know if that's always a good thing to say that. Apple says, I had my name called clear as day around 2 a.m. No one was there. It's a very creepy Appalachian lore as well as other places. And that is, if somebody calls my name at 2 a.m., I don't hear my name called, but I always hear somebody talking. Because I'll be like, what'd you say? And they'll be like, I didn't say anything. But I always seem to hear somebody talking.
I've had that. I've had that happen before too, and you're just kind of like, okay, you feel a little uncomfortable with it, man. You're like,
yeah, I don't want to do
it off a little bit. Like,
but I have to wonder too if that's because folks like ourselves, whether we admit or not, we open ourselves up to these things. We open ourselves to that spiritual realm because we want to know more about it. And I think if you know more about something, if you learn more about something, whatever entities encircle what you are learning about, like you said before, and I think this is a great point. You said they want to know why you know that. Why do you know that? Who taught you that information? You're not supposed to know that information. That's not for you.
You're an outsider. You're not supposed to be aware of stuff.
And I think that once you do that, like I study a lot of jinn. Like I'm very much into like jinn and the Watchers and different entities of that nature. And I've studied the Book of Enoch and pulled different texts and pieces. And it just feels like you set up almost this is probably gonna sound crazy, but whatever, I don't care. You set up a mind link with these entities because they're like,
that doesn't sound crazy at all. That does not sound crazy at all.
They're like, who were you again, sir? You were not thousands of years old, young man.
Yeah, when I first started doing the Skinwalker research, one of the people that I speak to, he pulled me aside and he said, look, I appreciate that you have an open mind, but don't leave every part of you open. Close off certain parts of you and don't allow these things to have entry. So just be very guarded, So, that kind of spooked me a little bit. I'm not going to lie, dude. I was kind of like, whoa, what do you mean? But he's like, no, just don't believe 100% that they can have power over you. Try to shield yourself from that. That way they can't, manifest inside of your mind and do what they want to do. So, that was some really wise advice, and I've stuck to that.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. Like, once I started getting into the fallen ones and then learning about jinn and what jinn can do and how jinn are actually pre-Islamic.
Yes.
Islam just kind of had them in, but they existed when Arabs were nomads going from place to location to location to location in the Middle East. They existed before that. And when you read, the Quran, and then when you read other ancient texts like the Aztecs, the Mayas, the Incans, all these other people, their gods created what they would call humanoids before they created mankind. And jinn were actually created before humans. And they couldn't they in Islamic tradition, they didn't want to bow to Adam. So basically Allah separated them via destroying their world, but it almost, the way it translates, they mingled it. So like they exist in a different dimension than us. And I find it fascinating that it goes on to say that they can have kids, get married, intermingle, that sort of thing. So it's almost like they exist as human beings exist, but on a different plane than human beings exist. And I have to wonder if some of these beings that you speak of, Wendigos, exist on a different plane, but somehow they can interact on this plane with other people. Because as much as Wendigos and Skinwalkers are these monster beings, there's also very good beings that exist in Native American folklore. And if you're lost in the woods, they will help you get through the woods, or they will help you get back home, or they will leave little things for you, like food and stuff like that, to show, hey,
if you're respectful.
Okay. If you're respectful.
If you're respectful.
Like
again, that's the big trick.
Yeah, the deer woman in a way can be a positive thing. There's different stories about her, but I mean, I think she's only really bad if you're an adulterous male. You know, she does not like adultery.
That's true too. Yeah, it is.
But if you're a woman, I mean, she represents fertility. She represents a new beginning. She represents peace. And, you know, and she has helped lost children in the woods or lost women in the woods. So, you know, if you're a lady or you're a kid, deer woman's right up your alley, man. She's all there to support you. So
I've noticed that a lot of the deer men encounters are not very positive, though. I've noticed like quite a bit of those are kind of like, it's not so much they are aggressive. They are, why are you here?
Yeah.
What are you doing? We're doing our thing. Leave us be. You're not going to leave us be. Now we're going to come for you. Cause I've read a couple different accounts of deer men, and they're usually non-aggressive until you get into their territory. And then they want to know, why are you there? There's no business for you to be here.
That's fitting though. I mean, wherever humans go, we cause trouble, you know, I mean, do we really bring a lot of good where we go? Not really. Most of the time, you know, we start out with good intentions, but those good intentions go awry real fast. So, I mean, you know, if I were a deer man, I'd be like, oh, great, humans. There goes the neighborhood. I wouldn't be too happy about it. So
there goes our property values. They're definitely going down.
Well, things were nice until the humans showed up.
Who let Jim live here? I don't even like Jim. I think humans individually are highly intelligent.
Yes.
We do the best we can. But when you get us into a mob mentality,
that's where the
then
problem
you
comes.
Then you have things like the Holocaust. Then you have things like the smallpox blankets. Then you have things like the witch trials, and you have all these atrocities that are committed in by and large because we get into a hive mind and we don't know how to.
Tommy Lee Jones said in Men in Black, people are smart. You know, crowds are stupid.
Yes. Yes. I mean, and people look so much to follow instead of lead. They don't want to lead. They want to have somebody do that for them. And that's where the group think comes in. That's where the problems arise, because nobody's going to stand up and say, I don't like what you're saying, because you'll have 15 people that say, oh, well, I don't like you. I don't like you either. I don't like him either. And all the leader does is turn them against him. And there you go. And next thing you know, you have atrocities, because it's a hop, skip, and a jump to an atrocity. You know, we've seen them all over the globe, and it's not relegated to one specific race or group of people. You have tragedies in Asia, Africa, the United States, you know, and it's not going to stop. I think it's only going to get progressively worse, but I think society resets. I think every so many thousands of years, a catastrophic event happens, and we've seen it play out. I think society is built on society after society after society after society. You know, you go to places and they'll dig up one spot, but then they dig and they're like, wait a minute, why is there a city under this city? The city wasn't supposed to be here. Wait, why is there a city under this city? And then you get into places like Rajasthan in India that has a nuclear radiation fallout, or they have glass that is only formed via a nuclear heat. That's the only way it can be formed. And we're talking ancient times. We're not talking like past 100 years. We're talking well before any of us existed. So to sit there and tell me we're at our most advanced place we've ever been, I can't necessarily believe that. I just
Yeah,
think
I don't
we're
know if I
advanced
agree
in a
with that
different
either.
way. I think
Yeah, I would agree with that.
because if you look at how the pyramids were built, these are giant granite blocks. You have,
Yes.
you have places in South America where it's cut so precise you can't even
Mhm.
stick a credit card in between the cracks because it's just built perfectly.
That's
The
actually really cool, though, when you think about that.
Oh yes,
That's talent, man. That is some skill right there.
and we can't even do that now.
No,
Like
no, that's why it's like, whoa, these guys were wow. They knew what they were doing.
and you think about the Nazca lines. What were those for? Why did they build the Nazca lines for? Who did they build them for?
Right.
These are the things that keep me awake.
Yeah, we've got the same problem, man.
Yeah, I research more than I sleep. I can
Yeah,
guarantee that.
yeah, me too. There's always something I'm looking up or trying to learn where I'm just like, yeah, I was gonna sleep tonight, but nope.
Yeah,
Guess not.
because
Get the coffee ready.
once the brain starts, I can't just turn it off. Like
Me either.
it
It's
starts.
not possible.
Ryan, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on Facebook. Just look up Ryan Paul Tremblay. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. And pretty soon I'll be doing a YouTube show again, Let the Monsters In. But I got to get everything organized before I can start doing that. So be on the lookout for that.
Well, when you set that up, please let us know. We would love to promote
Absolutely.
it. Let people know what's going on. We definitely would like to link up with you if we're ever out in Arizona. I think that'd be a very
Yes, please do.
interesting conversation to have. Also, we definitely would like to get you back on the show again.
Yes, definitely.
This has been this has probably been one of my favorite chats. Just learning about something that I was already interested in, but then getting like somebody who knows more than I do. I always respect that. I always like to learn, so I appreciate.
I'm glad we could have this conversation, man. I enjoyed it too.
Same. Well, that's it for us tonight. I want to thank our guest, Ryan Tremblay, for being here and being a good sport, being a good guy. We appreciate you. Thank you so very much.
My pleasure.
We'll be back next week with some more good stuff. Monday, I have something planned for you guys involving a man that saw a UFO and a couple Bigfoots. So he will be live with us Monday. It's going to be about 5:30. So please tune in for that. I'll release that name here within the next couple days. And thank you, Scruffy, for the awesome convo comment. Thank you to everybody that commented. We very much appreciate you. I love good chat. I love seeing people's thoughts, opinions, beliefs. It's awesome. Thank you. Ghost says, Ryan, we will talk. So that's awesome.
Absolutely, Ghost. We will.
I enjoy having all of you here. Me and my co-host, we both stream. I am streaming live now on Twitch this interview, this show. So by all means, feel free to follow me. Uncanny Alchemist. By all means, I stream as much as I possibly can. I enjoy video games, and I also enjoy the paranormal and the esoteric side of life. So, by all means, please stop by, show love. Show this man, Ryan, love. He's a good guy. We appreciate you coming on, man. I had an absolute blast talking to you this time.
I did too, man. It was a great show, guys.
Excellent.
Take care, everybody.
Well, that's all for us. As always, why be boring when you can be uncanny? We will see you folks next week.